Brooklyn Nets are positioned to be a dark horse team and a real threat in the NBA. And no, I'm not talking about for this season. I'm not talking about trying to contend for an NBA championship. I'm talking about over the next couple of years positioning themselves to build a really dynamic, dangerous team that teams will have difficulty keeping up with and stopping. And it's going to take some time. There's going to be a lot of moves that have to be made to fulfill that, but I wanted to really focus on the Brooklyn Nets in today's video and talk about exactly what they're building, how they're going about their roster construction, and some of the nuances in the way that they're going to be able to add talent. And it really all starts with this guy, Sean Marks, who has been in this position before. He's been there and he's done that, and he's overseeing once again another Brooklyn Nets rebuild. Now, before we get into Sean Marks and his history, I do want to urge you guys to go subscribe to my Substack. Brand new. I want you guys to be the first people to go subscribe to the Substack. Link is in the description. There's a free option going over there. Subscribing is the best way to support me as I'm looking to grow my brand new Substack. Let's jump in now to Sean Marks' history, exactly who he is. First of all, he was hired in February of 2016 to be the Brooklyn Nets GM. Previously was the assistant GM of the San Antonio Spurs during multiple title runs. And the Brooklyn Nets, well, why did they hire him? Well, they had a lot of cleaning up to do after the Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Jason Terry trade that sent the Brooklyn Nets spiraling backward. Remember, in that deal, they sent out 5 players, 3 first-round picks, and a pick swap. 2 of those assets ended up later becoming Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. The Celtics have built a championship off of that trade, potentially are en route to maybe making a second championship run with Tatum and Brown as their 1 and 2 options. And the Nets were really in a dark place as this trade unfolded. Trading for an older Kevin Garnett, an older Paul Pierce, an older Jason Terry really just led to diminished results in Brooklyn. They only won 1 playoff series with the Deron Williams, Brook Lopez, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Jason Terry core. They just weren't able to actually accomplish anything on the floor that I think most people at the time were hopeful they would see from such an experienced and such a talented unit. The Nets just never got there, which is why Sean Marks was brought in to creatively retrofit the roster. And starting at the head coach position, he did just that, hiring Kenny Atkinson, who since then has become known for his ability to develop players, and honestly just being a very good coach with a lot of sound practices on the actual basketball floor from an X's and O standpoint. But also, again, the developmental area was one of the biggest key reasons why Sean Marks brought Kenny Atkinson in. We'll talk about that here in just a minute too. But I also want to talk about these 3 players. What do Tyler Johnson, Allen Crabbe, and Otto Porter Jr. have in common? And you're probably looking at this saying, I have no idea. What do these 3 players have in common? The answer is Brooklyn Nets offer sheets. During Sean Marks' early tenure with the Brooklyn Nets, in fact, his first offseason and second offseason with the Nets, it coincided with the cap spike in the NBA, meaning all 30 teams had cap space, all 30 teams were aggressive with their money, and Sean Marks took advantage of that. Went out in 2016 and signed Allen Crabbe to a multi-year offer sheet, signed Tyler Johnson to a 4-year offer sheet as well. And what it did was it placed a lot of pressure on their home teams, the Miami Heat and the Portland Trail Blazers, to either match that offer sheet or lose young up-and-coming players for nothing to Brooklyn, who had cap space at the time and was aggressively looking for young talent to rebuild, especially since they didn't have some of their own draft picks toward the top of the drafts. As a result, Miami matched the offer sheet for Tyler Johnson, which had a significant cap hit in the final 2 years of that deal. Portland matched Allen Crabbe's offer sheet, which was a straight flat deal with the same amount of money each season. So, yes, Sean Marks kind of quote-unquote struck out his first offseason as GM of the Brooklyn Nets, but actually ended up winning by placing bad contracts on both Portland and Miami's cap sheets. Then, fast forward to the next season, Washington Wizards youngster Otto Porter Jr. was in free agency as, again, a restricted free agent. Sean Marks, with cap space, once again targeted Otto Porter Jr. with a max contract offer sheet. Washington, again, scared to lose him for nothing, ended up matching the offer sheet, and we know how that went in Washington. The trio of John Wall, Bradley Beal, and Otto Porter Jr. just could never really get over the hump, and a big reason for that was the absolute humongous offer sheet Sean Marks had signed him to. So these offer sheets are extremely important, and by the end of the video, we're going to come back to this exact same ideology and why I think Sean Marks might be in position once again to really leave his mark in the NBA. But I want to talk about exactly what else he did to build his roster up. First of all, he had some creative trades. Traded an asset to go get Caris LeVert from the Indiana Pacers as a youngster. Traded Brook Lopez and a 2017 first-round pick to get former number 2 overall pick D'Angelo Russell from the Los Angeles Lakers. These two moves were real cornerstones for the Brooklyn Nets in their eventual kind of rewriting of their roster, rewriting of their team. We all know what D'Angelo Russell became there in Brooklyn, but it wasn't just creative trades. They also did a great job drafting, and they've continued to do, in my opinion, a pretty good job drafting, finding talent, especially down the board. Remember, without their own top picks, the picks that became Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, Brooklyn had to be creative, and they had to be very successful finding talent. I think one of their biggest draft hits was Jarrett Allen, who became a real cornerstone as their starting center for a while there in Brooklyn before ultimately being traded to Cleveland. I think another example on their current roster is Nick Claxton, second-round pick. Now their starting center at this point in time, obviously, I think a very good player, very good defensive player especially. Sean Marks has really done a great job hitting in the draft, selected Cam Thomas in the back end of the first round as well. He has done a good job not only analyzing and evaluating talent, but also adding that talent to his roster without having premium draft picks to work with. He's not working with a ton of lottery picks, not a ton of top 5, top 10 picks, given the team context that he inherited when he took the job. So the drafting has been very, very good in Brooklyn for the most part. Then you also look at other ways to find talent, and I think if you look at how he acquired Spencer Dinwiddie, how he was able to bring in Joe Harris, these are players who were not well decorated, were not household names at the time Brooklyn acquired them. And what that allowed Brooklyn to do was give minutes to some of these players to really find who stuck and who didn't stick in the NBA. I think another example is Sean Kilpatrick, a player who I had a lot of excitement around because he was a lot of fun to watch. He ended up not sticking in the NBA, but Sean Marks did a good job while taking over the rebuilding Nets, finding players who were true NBA talents like Spencer Dinwiddie, like Joe Harris, and these players ended up fitting pretty well around their core nucleus they had built in D'Angelo Russell, Jarrett Allen, and Caris LeVert. Also had brought in Jeremy Lin at one point, and it led to ultimately winning. At one point, the Brooklyn Nets in 2018 were able to completely turn the ship around, and think about how quick that is. Going from 2016, where the Nets were as just a very bad team, to a 2018-19 season where they're able to go in to the playoffs. They make the playoffs with D'Angelo Russell making his sole All-Star appearance. And what it ultimately ends in, we all know, is the Brooklyn Nets becoming a destination, not only for just Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in free agency, where those two superstar free agents chose Brooklyn over the New York Knicks. They were also able to position their assets that they had built up in terms of both draft pick equity and young talent to go trade for former MVP James Harden. Now, injury luck in the playoffs, you know, and a pandemic, the world has completely shifted since the time of any of these acquisitions. Because of that, you know, James Harden pulls his hamstring, Kyrie Irving lands on Giannis and hurts his ankle. There's a lot of what ifs with this core, and we don't need to rehash what this trio could have been, which in my opinion arguably would have been the best trio of all time had they been able to stay healthy at the right point in time. It just never panned out. So Sean Marks finds himself in a position to retool again, and I feel like he's kind of in a similar position to when he first started with Brooklyn in 2016, except they're a little bit further ahead. Cam Thomas, is a real scoring dynamo. I think he's going to be capable of averaging over 25 points per game this year. He's got a very small cap hold this offseason, and that cap hold's going to give them a little bit of extra flexibility, which we'll talk about here in a second. But first, I want to talk about their draft pick situation. And this is why they are a lot further ahead than they were last time Sean Marks was in this position. They have a plus collection of draft picks. Not only were they able to go get back some of their own picks in that trade with the Houston Rockets you'll see on the right side of your screen, but they were also able to bring in 5 total first-round picks from Mikal Bridges, 4 unprotected picks from the New York Knicks, who then went out and made another trade for Karl-Anthony Towns. I'm not exactly sure where the Knicks are going to stand. I think they're going to win a lot of regular season games this year, but we'll see how it all unfolds. A lot of unprotected first-round picks is very good value for the Brooklyn Nets, in my opinion. You also get a pick this year from the Milwaukee Bucks. The Nets are going to have a ton of darts to throw at players in the draft. They have other draft picks to use in trades as well. I think the Brooklyn Nets are in a very, very strong position from a draft pick standpoint and a young talent standpoint, already having Cam Thomas, already having Nick Claxton. They have some core pieces already on their roster, plus the ability to maybe trade away some more veterans. If you look at someone like Dorian Finney-Smith, reportedly a couple of years ago, the Nets wanted 2 first-round picks for him. I never really bought that a team was going to be willing to give that up unless they were very low-quality first-round picks. I'm talking picks in the very late 20s. So maybe Dorian Finney-Smith at this point in time can net you 1 bad first-round pick, or maybe a collection of multiple second-rounders, which would give the Nets even more stabs in the NBA draft year in, year out. And then Cam Johnson as well, a player who, you know, he's a little bit older than I think the general perception probably views him, but he's a winning player. And these are 2 players that contending teams would love to have. And I think the Nets would be able to find value for them, whether it's 1 first-round pick for both, maybe 1.5 first-round picks if you want to look at it that way, in terms of, you know, like a first-round pick plus something else for both of these guys. There's different ways to probably get to that kind of value that Brooklyn's looking for, but the overall point here is the Nets do have players that they could send out that would hold value around the league, that they could bring in more draft pick compensation, and remember, they have their own picks this year, so there's a really good chance the Nets find themselves positioned for one of these 4 players, whether it be at the very top of the draft for Cooper Flagg, which would be a dream outcome for Brooklyn. Otherwise, there's a scoring threat here in Ace Bailey, someone who I still think the fundamentals of his game need to improve. I think there's a lot of work for him to continue working on his actual footwork, technique, but the skill set's there, the shot making is very impressive, and if you're able to sharpen up the tools in his game and also round out his overall offensive skill set, Ace Bailey could be an absolute superstar in the NBA. You also have 2 really dynamic guards, Nolan Traore, who's really very good at getting downhill, and honestly just an impressive prospect from his ability to handle the basketball, handle pressure, turn the corner, and also still play make with a live dribble. And then Dylan Harper, a player who I think is going to really impress this year at Rutgers as well. The Scarlet Knights are going to have a great season with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper both there in the fold. So the Nets, not only are they in position to add some of their own talent in the draft, something Sean Marks wasn't really able to do toward the top of drafts the first time around, he's also positioned here with max cap space. And you might be saying, okay, well, free agencies typically kind of slowed down. You don't really have the free agent targets of old anymore. You're not getting superstar free agents. And you're completely right about that. But I do need to point out a few things, not only with Ben Simmons' contract coming off the books, but also Bojan Bogdanovic's contract, Dennis Schroeder's contract, and Cam Thomas's small cap hold relative to what his actual value around the league might be. The Nets are in position to add multiple veterans, plus a real big name free agent. And you might be saying, okay, well, who's the free agent? Alperen Şengün signed his rookie extension with the Houston Rockets. Jalen Green signed a rookie extension with the Rockets. Trey Murphy III signed a rookie extension with the Pelicans. There's a lot of players around the league right now that have extended already, and that continues to be a trend we see. There is one, however, that didn't, and this is where we get back to the offer sheets. In restricted free agency, I could very, very well see the Brooklyn Nets heavily targeting Warriors forward Jonathan Kuminga, who did not sign an extension with the Golden State Warriors before the start of the NBA season. He will be a restricted free agent. Now, listen, the Warriors do have the ability to match any offer sheet for Jonathan Kuminga that he signs. Could the Brooklyn Nets strike out again like they did with Tyler Johnson, like they did with Allen Crabbe, like they did with Otto Porter Jr.? Possibly. But there will be a lot of pressure placed on the Golden State Warriors if Sean Marks is able to give Jonathan Kuminga a full max contract for a restricted free agent. That will put the Warriors in a spot of questioning, first of all, is Jonathan Kuminga worth that contract? And will it age poorly like those Otto Porter Jr., Tyler Johnson, and Allen Crabbe contracts did? And now I think Kuminga's a better player than those three guys were, in my opinion. So first of all, I think he's more likely to be worth a contract that would be a max offer sheet. But it will put a lot of pressure on the Golden State Warriors. There's other players out there in free agency that Brooklyn could theoretically go after, but I think from a timeline perspective, Jonathan Kuminga is the player that really makes the most sense. It would be fascinating to see if Brooklyn is able to poach him from Golden State, which really leads me to wondering, can Sean Marks do it again? Can he effectively lead Brooklyn out of this kind of scary territory of being a bad team once again after a bunch of turnover, a bunch of turmoil, especially internally with the Durant, Irving, Harden saga? Everything just has not seemingly worked out in Brooklyn, but every decision Sean Marks has made has been relatively sound. Getting D'Angelo Russell, getting Caris LeVert, drafting Jared Allen, drafting Nick Claxton, drafting Cam Thomas, trading for James Harden, signing Kevin Durant, signing Kyrie Irving. All of those things in a vacuum seem very, very smart. And then trading away Kevin Durant for a real collection of assets. Remember what they were able to get for him: Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, all of the Suns picks essentially, then turning that around once they entered rebuild to get 5 picks from the Knicks, get all of their assets back for the most part from the Rockets. Not all of them, but most of them. The Nets have been really walking in the tightrope, and I do think Sean Marks has been doing a very good job overall, but there is still a lot of pressure on him to finish the process, and at some point that means getting to a conference finals. Brooklyn hasn't done that under Sean Marks, and I think there's a lot of pressure on him to effectively turn this team around one final time. And is he going to be able to do that? How long will it take? It'll take multiple years, don't get me wrong. They're going to be really indexing on a lot of young talent, whether that be Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey or Nolan Traore or Dylan Harper, if they're indexing on Jonathan Kuminga. What this video is really intended to do is point to the optionality that Brooklyn has, how Sean Marks is in a position to almost repeat history and really reinvent the Brooklyn Nets one more time. I'm very excited to watch how he does it. I think this team is one of the most important teams to watch from a transaction standpoint over the next few years. Them and the Washington Wizards are two of the most important, in my opinion, because Brooklyn has proven itself to be able to become a market for a star player. And if Sean Marks can position this team correctly once again, they could very quickly ramp up their talent level one more time and position themselves to be a big player in the NBA in the not so distant future if things go perfectly well. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.